Back to the Future is one of the most influential films of all time that managed to span 3 movies in its franchise. So today we are going to rank the Back to the Future franchise from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Zach, and I don't like to just watch movies. I have a passion of talking about them as well. If that sounds like you, you're in the right place. Consider hitting that subscribe button. And please join the conversation down in the comment section. Tell me how you would rank all 3 Back to the Future movies. With all that said and done, let's get started with number 3. And in last place, I have to go with Back to the Future Part 3. Now, just for reference, I do enjoy this movie. I do put this on from time to time, especially if I'm doing a Back to the Future marathon. If I start with the first one, go into the second one, I've got to go into the third one. In fact, they made the third one essential to the second one when they did Part 2. They planned Part 3, they shot them back to back, and they were released a year apart from each other. And even with that said, whenever I watch Back to the Future Part 3, it always feels like the franchise is running a little bit out of steam. Now, Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd as Marty and Doc are still great, and we do get to see them interact the most in this third installment since the first movie in the franchise. And I do like that this movie tries to find that end to Doc Brown's arc by bringing in the love interest of Clara, having him fall in love. But for me, someone who's not that huge on the Western genre in general, this one was probably always going to be at the bottom of the list regardless of how it turned out. Now, I do enjoy the aspects of the franchise that still play into this one, as the cast has always played variant versions of themselves. So seeing Michael J. Fox as his Irish ancestor, and you get Thomas F. Wilson in here still being the big bad Biff, this time as the ancestor of Biff Tannon. But at this point in the franchise, now that we're 3 movies in, doing this trope again, it does start to feel a little bit tired. And that's how Back to the Future Part 3 always comes across me when I watch it. It's still got the characters that I enjoy. It's still got some time travel fun and shenanigans, but at the same time, the concept is starting to feel tired. This whole idea is starting to get a little bit more played out by the minute. And by the time the movie ends, it does wrap up this trilogy in a pretty satisfying enough way. But I'm also willing to say, all right, after Back to the Future Part 3, I'm done. I'm glad they didn't make a 4th one. Our runner-up, Back to the Future Part 2. And I know this might be a little bit controversial for some Back to the Future fans out there, because a lot of people, they have either Part 3 above Part 2 or Part 2 above Part 3. For me, I am more of a Part 2 guy. Now, Back to the Future 1 was supposed to be a one-off, and they only did Part 2 and eventually Part 3 because of the huge success that it ended up being. So the film's setup of where they decide to take Marty, because at the end of Part 1, Doc comes and gets Marty and his girlfriend Jennifer, where they're going, they don't need roads. The way that they have to now think up a line that was supposed to just be a joke and now show what they actually meant by it, it's a little clunky. I mean, going to the future just to stop Marty's son from getting into a gang with Biff's grandson and eventually going to jail, and the whole point of Marty and Doc going to the future to save his kids was to just stop his son from going to jail. Not the strongest starter, in my opinion. And you can kind of see how the film is kind of scrambling to make that last line in the first film work. I do feel like the transition from Part 1 into Part 2, going into the future of 2015, especially at the time before 2015 was an actual year, this was a lot of fun to kind of see a futuristic world of what the filmmakers thought 2015 was going to be. And now, even today, it's kind of fun to look back and see what they thought 2015 was going to be and just how wrong they got it and how right they got it in some aspects. But for me, one of the appealing aspects of Back to the Future is how it plays with the concept of alternate realities, doing one little thing that changes the course of history forever. I enjoy the darker aspects of the film when we go to a reality where Biff Tannen is ruler of the world, or ruler of Hill Valley, the ruler of something. The guy becomes a big, almost mob boss in a way. And to see this horrific scenario play out with Marty, now his mom's married to Biff, and Biff is this abusive abusive stepfather to Marty. It is really dark stuff in some ways for this franchise, but it also was my first introduction to alternate realities and the idea of that, and I thought it was so cool, and I still think it's so cool to see these alternate versions to this day, as well as the later half of the film going back into the first film and showing us scenarios from different perspectives and play out in different ways. I know some people find that kind of annoying and kind of cliche, where it's like, oh, we're just spending more time in a film we've already watched. I found all of this so much fun and so fascinating when I first watched Back to the Future Part 2, and I still enjoy going back and seeing it to this day, especially after I watch Part 1. I've got to watch Part 2, and I always enjoy seeing the different perspectives that were off camera in Part 1 playing out in Part 2. I, for one, actually find it very creative and inventive, and I think that there's a lot of enjoyment that comes from having the nostalgia of going back to that first film, but also doing something new and unique with it. But easily at number 1 is going to be Back to the Future, the influential movie from 1985, and honestly, one of my, if not my favorite movies of all time. The idea of this teenage kid going back to the 1950s where he has to interact with his parents and find out what they were like at his age. It's all built on that concept of, if you were in high school with your parents, would you be friends with your parents? It's a really fun and unique idea to throw out there that this film has a lot of fun playing around with, while also introducing us to some really fun characters with Marty and Doc Brown. Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox, they just have instant chemistry. You don't even question why this high school kid is hanging out with this like 40-year-old man. The young actors play the older versions of their characters. It's worked the best in this franchise in this first film, especially, I would say, with Crispin Glover. It's so disappointing to me that Crispin Glover was such a hard person to work with on set, and that they had a falling out that prevented them from being in the sequels. I think Crispin Glover gives such a unique, wacky, quirky performance as George McFly in Back to the Future, but he's also the heart, I find, of Back to the Future. Marty is our eyes into this past world, but we're rooting George McFly to get the girl of Lorraine, and Marty, we're rooting for him to get his parents together so he doesn't vanish out of existence. The script of this movie is so tight and referential to itself that from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie, there are Easter eggs all throughout that both tie back into each other, where you can see where, for example, at the start of the film, there are little tie-ins to what we're going to see play out in the end of the film that you only really catch when you go back on rewatches and you see how the entire thing has already played out. For that reasons, it is one of my favorite scripts ever written. It's one of my favorite movies to watch over and over again, because I'm always picking up on so many different things, different lines of dialogue, different scenes of imagery that are all referencing and relating back to something else that was said, mentioned, or alluded to in the film previously. And on top of that, it's just full of fun characters, a fun concept, a realized world of 1985 and 1955. Back to the Future for me just brings endless entertainment. It is the definition of what people like to call movie magic, and for that reason, Back to the Future comes in as my number 1 favorite of the franchise. Tell me down below how you would rank the Back to the Future franchise from the worst to the best. If you like this video and want more content like it, I've got a full Back to the Future review right down there that you can check out, as well as a ranking of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy right there. Check those videos out. As always, guys, thank you so much for hearing me out. Don't just watch movies, talk movies. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.